This is Mr. Mitchell. Hey, this is Mr. Mitchell with another video. Today we're going to talk about economies throughout the world. Here are some questions about these economies. Go ahead and write these down. We'll get to the answers in just a second. You can see here we have four different types of economies off to the left. And we're going to talk about the role that they play in government and the role that they play as far as being capitalistic or socialistic. A market economy is first. In a market economy, the government plays a very small role, and you can see how I have the government really small here. What determines the price of goods and what determines how many goods are made is basically just what the consumer purchases. For example, if people are buying a lot of donuts, then tendency for people to make a lot of donuts to buy, and tendency for the price of the donuts to be either high or low depending on how many people are willing to purchase them. It's not the government's decision as to what goods are made or what price to put it at. It's people's decision by how much they purchase it. If you make a soft drink out of seaweed, nobody's going to buy it, so nobody's going to make it eventually because they wouldn't be able to make any money off of it. It's completely up to the consumer, the people who buy things, that determines in a market economy what goods are made and who it's made for and what the prices are. And this is a sign of a capitalist type of economy, you might say. Now let's go to the opposite, the command economy. The command economy is sometimes called a planned economy, and the most important aspect is that every major decision related to the production of goods, the distribution of goods, and prices of goods are all made by, you guessed it, the government. You may remember that we talked about how some countries have the government make all the decisions for the people. That's exactly what kind of economy this is. It's a socialist government. So if the government wants to have a kind of drink that is made from seaweed, they will make it regardless of whether people buy it or not. The planned economy government directs the market, and what the demand of the people who buy things has very little determination in such an economy. This type of economy lacks a little flexibility that a market economy has, and it reacts slower to any kinds of consumer needs or fluctuating patterns of what people want and what people don't. Planned economies mean that they are socialist. Now, in the real world, you have very few true market economies and very few true command economies. The United States here, we try to be a market economy, but the government has to kind of step in sometimes and have some kind of control just to make sure that things are continuing to run well. In a command economy, it's true that sometimes the demands of the people do kind of get done by the people who are in the government. If somebody is not wanting a Coca-Cola or a drink made out of seaweed, then eventually the government will kind of back down. So in reality, almost every country is going to be some sort of mixed economy. Not true capitalist, not true socialist, but close to it. Like the United States is close to, or tries to be capitalist. We're much more capitalist than we are socialist. And in a mixed economy, it combines both elements of the command economy and of the market economy. So you're going to have certain features from both types that are taken into account in this one. And most countries are this. In a mixed economy, there's a little bit of flexibility that you don't have in the command economy. And in a mixed economy, it also kind of provides for a fail-safe in case things start collapsing in the market economy. Mixed economy includes both kinds of policies and include a wide range of political and economic views. You can have a mixed economy that is like France or like Cuba, that is almost all socialist. It's just that the market plays a little bit of a role. You can have a mixed economy like the United States, Canada, Mexico, European Union, that is almost all capitalist, but has to have some form of government just to keep it running well. Now, a kind of economy you almost never see in the modern world is a traditional economy. A traditional economy is often in an underdeveloped country, a primitive country where communities use primitive tools and methods to harvest and hunt for food. And this usually doesn't have much economic growth. It doesn't have many people. It doesn't have many buyers. But the reason it's called traditional is because you use the culture system already in place that determines who gets goods and services. In a market economy, whoever can afford to buy, say, a tractor, gets the tractor. In a command economy, whoever the government says should have a tractor gets a tractor. In a mixed, it kind of just depends on how capitalist or how socialist you are. In a traditional economy, it would be the culture and the customs that would determine who gets, say, that tractor, if you would even have one there. Let's say it's the leader of a tribe would be the only ones allowed to have a tractor. Maybe it's just the male who's the oldest male of the family who's allowed to have some kind of tractor, or whatever it happens to be. Tractor's just the example I'm using. So there's really not going to be much demand for goods because not many people will want the tractor. They just know that it's part of their heritage that only certain people get that tractor. So there's very little supply, only the amount of supply is made that's really need, and almost no demand. Okay, there are some other economic terms I'd like for you to know, and one of them is gross domestic product, and that's called a GDP. A GDP is determined by taking the total value of all goods and services produced by a country in a single year. Now just imagine the staggering figure that is. I mean, think of just a classroom of 25 students in there. If you were to add up the cost of every bit of clothing that was made that year, of every bit of jewelry that was made that year, of every watch, of every phone, of every iPad, of every hairdo that somebody got done by a hairstylist. I mean, there's just so much money that has been spent by and for 25 people in a classroom. The GDP adds up every single good and service produced in a year or produced in a set given time. So when you talk about the gross domestic product of a whole state like Georgia, or a whole country like the United States, we're talking about millions times millions. We're talking about like trillions of dollars. So there's really not much practical function for that except for determining which countries have a healthy economy. The wealthier countries have a higher gross domestic product than the developing or underdeveloping countries. So the United States will often come out with what the gross domestic product is for such and such a place, for such and such a country, and you can compare those from month to month or from year to year to see if more people are buying or if less people are buying. Now, there are some things that we need to know about gross domestic product. Human capita. Human capita is the knowledge and the skills that workers have. Now, you have to train people how to work. To be a teacher, I had to go to a college and be trained on how to be a teacher. To work construction, you have to either be trained or learn construction from some other person. So that's what human capital is. The more skills and education that workers have, the better they are able to work without mistakes and to learn new jobs as technology changes. Companies that invest in their human capital, in other words, train people to be better workers and teachers and preachers and all the types of jobs that they have, good companies will earn more profits if they train and educate their workers, if they have their human capital be more trained. So what do you think happens to the GDP of states that have a lot of education for humans to be trained? It goes up, of course. There is a relationship between educating humans, educating workers, and gross domestic product going up. In other words, you make more money if you have more trained workers. Now, what does that mean for capital goods? If you invest in capital goods, that means more factories, more machines, more technology. If you invest in factories, machines, and technology, many workers can work together and can increase production, and that makes that production more efficient. Producing more goods for sale in a quicker and more efficient way leads to economic growth and greater profit. So if you invest in human capital, it rises the GPD. If you invest in capital goods like machines and technology and factories, what do you think it'll do to GDP? It will also raise it up. I hope you've learned a little bit about the economy.